give us an update on all the things that have been happening. Welcome, Kate. Good to see you.
Good morning. You each have a copy of the annual report from the Board of Elections. So what I'd like to do is just kind of touch on some high points. One being the voter registration. As of 1st of August, our voter registration was 7,099. That is a significant decrease since my last annual report. I believe that is due to the list maintenance process that we are mandated to do in January. This was one of our larger list maintenance groups that I've seen. We placed 270 inactive voters into removed status. What that means is these voters were inactive, meaning they've not voted in 2 federal general elections before they were placed inactive, and then they remained inactive for 2 more federal general elections. So without any further contact with them, the process is to place them in removed status. We don't purge, but that's what that is. Also, I looked at our records, and we've removed approximately 50 voters as deceased. That's one of our larger numbers that I've seen in a long while. So our office has seen quite a number of reasons for the decrease, which has caused a decrease of 2%. However, our overall voter population is 63.6%, so it's still a rather large number considering our overall population. And I do want to remind the board that our numbers fluctuate. They're not going to remain the same at any given time. Since the last report, we've had the general election. We had a turnout of 5,167 voters, which is 69.89% of registered voters. 3,029 of those cast ballots at one stop. The canvass was done in November. The board approved 16 provisionals out of 36. A recount was held on November 27th for the commissioner race, and we didn't see any change in that. I spoke to you about our list maintenance. We've done that. Of course, our office has seen quite a number of changes since the beginning of January. First and foremost was the change in the State Board of Elections. Governor McCrory saw fit to completely replace the State Board of Elections with all new members. That happened in April. Their first meeting was May the 1st, where they opted not to reinstate Gary Bartlett as the executive director. They went with a new executive director, Kimberly Strack. She took office May the 15th. The new County Board of Elections were sworn in July 15th. Our new board members are Mac Murphy, he's our chair, George Sheets, and Ed Adams. So we do have a new board as well. We had polling place inspections. I went along with Gerald Leftwich, our emergency management director, as I do every year. This is one of our first years where we didn't have any violations. That's a good thing. We had our candidate filing. The mayor's race is uncontested, but we do have a contest in the town council race. So that's something to look forward to. We had our open house August the 1st, and we were fortunate enough to have Representative Elmore come and visit. He also was given a demonstration on the Ivotronic voting machines. So that's a plus for us. Also, the County Board of Elections has authorized me to present a precinct official certification course. And we're going to start that course hopefully next Tuesday, August the 27th. It's going to run for about 6 weeks, one night a week from 6 to 9. And we're hoping that we can get our precinct officials interested in that, and we can get a larger pool of people to choose from in the future. And hopefully, we're optimistic that we might be able to get a little bump in pay for those who get certified. Because there's a lot of changes that are coming. Which leads me to my next topic, which is something that I've never done before in an annual report. However, this time I felt obligated to do so. In my presentation to you in July regarding House Bill 607, I told you that I was looking for an omnibus bill. That did happen. House Bill 607 did stay in the clerk's office. However, House Bill 589, the Voter Identification Verification Act, became the Election Reform Omnibus Bill. I have a copy of it. It has 60 parts to it. It was ratified July the 26th. It was signed into law August the 12th. There are a lot of parts to this bill that I really am not happy to have to bring to you. First, they did shorten one stop from 17 days to 10 days. Why that is important to you is in the debates and in the discussions that they held, they brought forth an amendment which was incorporated into the session law, or what is now the session law. And that was that the county boards of elections must operate the same number of hours as they did in prior elections. That being said, what it means, 2014 is going to be a midterm election. We will be required to have the same hours of operation as we did in 2010, which was the prior midterm. In 2016, we will have to stay open the same number of hours we did last year. In 2010, we were open 113 hours. Last year, we were open 123. I have done some calculations. I have taken it to the board. Right now, we're looking at, based on what the law calls for, which mandates a 1 o'clock closing the last Saturday. We cannot stay open past 1. In the days that we are open, and there is some question regarding Sunday, I'm not sure about that, and I'm hoping to get clarification when I leave for training tomorrow. But taking Sunday out of the equation, working a 12-hour day, every day but the last Saturday, we still come up 12 hours short. So it's questionable how we're going to handle that. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where we fall in that. And I'm hoping that the state board is going to give us some leeway, because we really have no place for additional one-stop sites, which would actually cost the county more money to maintain than staying open longer. So that's what we're looking at there. They did eliminate same-day registration. Just to give you an idea of how that affects us, in 2012, in the general election, we processed approximately 30. That won't happen. We'll stick with the 25-day deadline. 25 days prior to the election is the cutoff day for registrations. If a voter is not registered by that time, next year, this all takes effect January of 2014. So right now they can still do it, but come January of 2014, it stops. It did away with pre-registration of 16-year-olds. It does not change those 17-year-olds who will be 18 before the general election, on or before. Those 17-year-olds can still register and vote in the primaries. That does not change. However, pre-registration stops. Of course, we have the voter ID bill. They shortened the acceptable forms of ID. That information is going to start coming out next year. And my office is going to be working with the Department of Motor Vehicles because our DMV is not open 5 days a week. So part of this is they are allowing a mobile unit to come to counties that fit our description. And I will be working with the DMV to get out the publicity so that our citizens know when that unit is here so they can come and get their ID if they don't have one. But I'll be getting more information as I get it within the next 6 months or so. The voter ID is not mandated until 2016. Voters will be asked to show their ID next year. However, if they don't have one, they're still going to be allowed to vote. They did not, as I said I thought they would, they did not include partisan races for judges. What they did was they removed the same party ticket. So there's no more straight party voting. They thought, according to their discussions, that would give everybody equal chances. They did also include what I was afraid of, which was a presidential preference primary. What that means is if South Carolina holds a presidential primary before, before March the 15th of 2016, North Carolina will hold its presidential preference primary the first Tuesday following South Carolina's. It will not be an all-inclusive primary. It will only be the presidential. So if this were to occur, and I feel fairly confident in saying I expect it to happen, North Carolina, or Allegheny will be seeing 2 primaries that year. It will not be assisted, the cost will not be assisted by the state. It will fall directly on the counties. I apologize for bringing you that news. Finally, let's talk about House Bill 607. As I stated, it did not progress past the clerk's office. However, Session Law 589, Part 30, does include simplifying North Carolina elections by requiring the use of paper ballots. This is not a study bill. This is not a study part. There are a number of parts of this bill, or this law, that are studies. This is not one of them. This will be mandated as of January 1, 2018. This was why I wanted to bring this to you in July. This was what I was concerned would happen. It did. We now have until January 2018 to start preparations. I know that the State Board of Elections right now is trying to determine the meaning of some of the language of Part 30 and how we can help mitigate the damage to the counties, but unless something happens next year, I don't foresee it going away. So So I do regret to inform you that the removal of the DREs, as I brought to you in the July meeting, is now a fact. And I'm here to answer any questions that you have regarding this news, this report.
How much is a second primary going to cost our county?
A presidential preference primary, looking at 2 parties, you're talking probably around 13,000. Because you're talking more ballot styles. So you have to basically count 1 primary for the Democrat Party, 1 primary for the Republican Party. And then we won't talk about if there's a Libertarian on the ballot.
What? I don't even understand why we need a second primary. I don't understand the reasoning. Can you explain that?
Second primary, the law still includes the right of a candidate who, if the candidate falls beneath the substantial plurality, which basically means 40% of the votes in a multi-seat race. If the candidates fall beneath that number, whatever that number is, then the lowest can ask for a second primary to determine, especially if they're close. That's usually what happens. That law hasn't changed. If they're over the 40%, then they can't call for it.
But this is a mandatory, we're discussing a mandatory
Oh, you're,
primary for the
okay, I'm
presidential.
sorry. I
The president-
apologize.
I'm
You're
sorry.
talking
Okay,
about,
it's not clear.
we have the presidential and then the
Yes.
second,
What is the purpose
Real.
of having a presidential election separate? What is the reasoning?
the only thing that I can gather from listening to the discussions in both the Senate Rules Committee, let me rephrase that, in the Senate Rules Committee and then in both the Senate and the House, was to give North Carolina a voice in the presidential races, in the national conversation. Basically, what we're seeing are a number of states that are trying to get closer to Super Tuesday. With North Carolina's primary in May, unless we have a fluke, which we saw in 2008 in the Democrat primary, where the 2 candidates remain close all the way to the convention, North Carolina is usually one of the last primaries and the decisions are pretty much made at that point. So what their desire is to be more of a voice in that decision process. But they don't want to change the May primary from what it is now. This is solely for the presidential. That question was brought up. I apologize about the second primary thing. I did misunderstand. The question was brought up, why don't we move everything that happens in May to that primary? And they just didn't want to do that.
Just quickly, some of these changes, particularly the voter ID, and you said that does not take effect until the 2016.
It will be
Elections.
mandated, yes, sir.
That's when it's mandated. Now, coming up on the 2014 elections, I assume that that's going to be an opportunity to start getting the word out to our folks that
Right.
that it is going to be mandated. I think you said that voter ID, the IDs will be asked for.
My office at that point, come 2014, will be mandated to start their education process.
Right.
We will have sheets of paper that every voter will get, showing them what will be acceptable forms of ID and other voter ID information that they need to have. That all is going to happen between now and 2016.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get more clarification on implementation when I leave tomorrow. I do leave for mandated training tomorrow, and that is top on the agenda, is the voter ID.
And you didn't mention any changes in the provisional process, was there?
There are
was that-
changes. The changes to the provisional process are, if you go to the polls and you don't have your voter ID, you can vote. We won't turn you away, but you will have to vote a provisional ballot, and the change is there will now be a choice, a reason saying did not provide ID. If the voter then comes to the office and shows me their identification, then that provisional ballot will be approved.
Within a certain time period of
By noon the day before canvass.
So if, in the past, a provisional has worked, if, say, for instance, they show up at a different polling place or the incorrect polling place, isn't there a change?
There is a
along
change
those
in that
lines?
as well. If a voter, this is another part to the session law. Now, as it stands, if a voter were to go to the wrong precinct and did not go to the right precinct, as long as they were registered, the pattern has been that the County Board of Elections would approve that provisional ballot. They would vote provisionally at that precinct. Now, the statute reads that if they vote in the incorrect precinct, if they do not go to the right precinct, they will not be allowed to vote. Even if we allow them to vote a provisional ballot, it will not be approved.
I have been hung up in that before, and my vote would not be counted in the future in that situation.
No, ma'am,
It was
I
of no
regret.
fault of my own, someone made a mistake and had me registered at the wrong precinct, and.
What it will do is, I am going to be making an extremely diligent effort
I have-
prior to each election to make sure that our voters know what precinct they belong to
And by
because
the way,
of
that
that.
wasn't your tenure.
No,
That mistake was not yours. It was not
It-
your
it happens.
supervision.
it's an easy thing to do, especially if somebody moves within that 30, if somebody moves within a 30-day period, they can still vote at the old precinct. But if they move, say, 35 days or 31 days, that's where the problem lies, because it's still close enough that they think they can vote in the old precinct, but it's outside of that 30-day window that they will have to vote in their new precinct if they're registered and if they change their information. They also, I will tell you, mandated that the polls will close at 7:30, period. Now, if you're in line at 7:30, you'll still be able to vote. You won't be turned away. We're not gonna say, sorry, time's up, go away. You will still be allowed to vote. However, even in extreme circumstances where the County Board of Elections has had the option to keep the polling place open for an extra hour, that is no longer the case. It will be mandated, 7:30 is the deadline, just like the last Saturday of One Stop. It is 1 o'clock, period.
I have a question about the photo ID process.
Yes, ma'am.
Obtaining one if you don't have one.
Mhm.
You discussed working with the vehicle, Department of Motor Vehicles.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible that the Board of Elections could, computers are fairly available at a cheap price at making photo IDs
That
these days?
was one of the options, and as far as I'm aware, That option was removed in the Senate.
So the Board of Elections cannot process a photo ID.
That again is one of those areas that even after reading this session law numerous times since July 22nd, it's still unclear.
Will you get that
But-
clarified, please?
That's going to be clarified this week.
Thank you.
That's going to be clarified. If it turns out that our office will have the equipment to make the photo IDs, I will be back and I will let you know that for a fact.
I believe in a democracy, it should be made easier to be allowed to vote. And that would be a natural mindset for people to come to the Board of Elections to get a photo ID. And I assumed that would be part of this process, but that was not correct, I don't believe. So I'm hoping that that is one aspect of this change that we can do for people.
I hope.
Because it's hard to get to the Division of Motor Vehicles up here and get your license renewed.
Well, that is one reason why they opted to allow counties that don't have a full-time DMV office the option of the mobile unit.
But how often is that going to be available?
Again, that was brought to me by Representative Elmore. I didn't even know that we were going to have that option.
Working people work. They're not available during the day
I
very often.
understand. I'm not gonna sit here or stand here and tell you that I agree with every aspect of this. But my disagreement comes from an administrative point of view because my desire has always been and will always be to make it as convenient and as easy and as pleasant as possible for Allegheny's voters to vote. And no matter what this takes, no matter what it does, I'm still going to strive to do that. This does tend to tie my hands a little bit more, but we'll work on it. And as soon as I know more about it, I will keep you posted.
Great. Do we have any other comments? Okay, I'm sure we'll find our way through this and work through it, and we appreciate all the work that you're
Well, I
doing.
will gladly help you with this process, especially regarding the machines, because I do know that this is going to be a large cost to the county.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.